Okay, welcome everyone. I'll just give everyone a minute or two just to get logged in and to join us. It's another very hot and sticky evening here in Reading. I'm not sure how it is where you are, but I hope whatever the weather, you're comfortable. I've got two screens tonight, so forgive me if I'm moving kind of left and right as I speak, but I'm just keeping an eye on the numbers just to see that people are joining us. But welcome. This is our final webinar of this academic year, and we are absolutely delighted to close off this year's webinars with John Adams, who's joined us tonight to talk about a conversation with Sparrows, tales of autistic experience, trauma and well-being, seen from within a personal creative narrative. As always, I'm just going to start with a little bit of housekeeping and a little bit of information about the Wellbeing Hub. This might be particularly relevant if this is the first time that you've joined one of our webinars, but I'd like to introduce you to the team. So I'm Jo Billington. I'm joined tonight as well by Fiona Knott, who's possibly waving on the screen now. We also have two other colleagues, Emma Harris and Charlie Murphy, who are not with us this evening, but will I'm sure if you come to future webinars, you will meet them at some point. If you don't know much about the Wellbeing Hub, you can find out more on our website, and I'm going to put some links into the Q&A or our chat feature so that you can find out more about us. But in summary or in brief, our aim is to build an inclusive community of autistic people and their allies to work together to support autistic young people to thrive and flourish. In terms of what we do, the best way of finding out about all the things that we have, all the activities and the events that we run, is to sign up for our monthly newsletter. You can do that by emailing us at autism@reading.ac.uk. And in fact, if you want to find out anything about the Hub or make any contact with us, that is the email address to use. But if you'd like to sign up for the newsletter, we don't have one in August because of the summer break. So if you don't hear from us until September, that's the reason why. But yes, do sign up if you haven't already. You can find out more about everything that we do and why we do it on our website. And also previous talks, previous recordings of previous webinars are also available on our YouTube channel. And I just want to say that everything that we do, or pretty much everything that we do in the Wellbeing Hub, is funded through donations. So if you would like to support our work, you can also make a donation if you'd like to. And again, I'm going to put all of these links into the chat in a moment once John starts speaking. A little bit of housekeeping. Speakers generally talk for about 50 minutes or so, and then there'll be between 20 and 30 minutes at the end for questions. John's told me that he really enjoys questions, so it might be that we have a bit longer for that tonight, but we'll just see how the flow of the evening goes. Either way, we aim to finish promptly at 8, no later than 8:30. Please post your questions in the Q&A, and I will put as many of them as I possibly can to John, but apologies in advance if we don't manage to answer your particular question, but we will do our very best. Also, we're using a version of Teams called Town Hall, which doesn't have a chat feature for people who are watching the webinar, but you can use the Q&A to chat. And if you've been to our webinars before, you'll know that there's often a very rich conversation that's happening simultaneously in the Q&A whilst the speaker is delivering the talk. So please feel free to share your thoughts and your comments and share ideas, as well as your questions for John at the end. John has very kindly given us permission to record the talk tonight. So once we have processed that and uploaded it to our YouTube channel, Charlie, our administrator, will be sending out an email from Eventbrite with a link for you to be able to go and watch that video if you'd like to. And I just want to say a big hello to all the people who watch the video later on at some point in the future rather than here at the live event, because I know there are many of you that do that. So a special hello to you this evening. Before we get on to John, I just want to give a quick plug for our September talk. As I said, we don't have a newsletter, and we also don't have a webinar in August because of summer break in academia. So our next webinar will be in September, and that's on Thursday, the 18th of September, same time, 7 till 8:30 p.m. via Teams. And we will be joined by Jodie Clark in a talk called Understanding Autistic Burnout in Children and Young People. And again, I'm going to put a link to the Eventbrite booking page for that in the Q&A once John starts to deliver his talk. If you would like to suggest any topics or speakers for future talks, we're really open to that. And please fill out our Padlet page if you're interested in that. And again, I'll put a link to that in the Q&A. But tonight, we are delighted to welcome John Adams to the Wellbeing Hub webinar series. John is a researcher, an advocate, and fellow of the Royal Society for the Arts. As an artist, John works in many differing media, including sound, drawing, and performance, often referencing his autism, synesthesia, and dyslexia, all interwoven with history, science, time, and his past experiences. The result is a unique visual perspective of systemizing and recording history, time, and place, and he does not shy away from creating socially challenging and covert artwork. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing John's talk tonight. So I'm just going to stop sharing my slides, and I'm going to remove myself from the screen, and I'm going to share John's slides. And over to you, John. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for the kind introduction. I can add ADHD to that list of things that I've started to make artwork about as well, although I have been doing that without even knowing it. So here we go. I will tell you what the title means in a bit. So if we could have the next slide, please. So my talks tend to contain some humour, sarcasm, empathy, irony, heresy, irreverence, picture, metaphor, and fact. They also contain references to my lived experience of being autistic, ADHD, dyslexic, synesthetic, and I may also refer to mental health issues too. Next slide, please. So I'm AUDHD, dyslexic and a synesthete, and most definitely human. And mostly in my eyes, I feel I have skills, not deficits, but often society will feel differently. And these skills have been perfect for my twin careers as both an artist and a paleontologist. And we'll come into why and how I chose both of those soon too. Next slide, please. So I'm going to show you a brief glimpse of my life in pictures. It's not been easy at times, but I wouldn't change it, nor me, for the world, although ADHD has been kryptonite at times. The world wants me to change, not be different, not exist, cause me trauma, and oppress those like me. But today, primarily like me, I'd like you to know and feel that we all belong. Next slide, please. So how have I reconciled my trauma? Besides nature, through drawing, writing, and performances, not necessarily about what happened at the time, but also what happens after. So these are these three pieces of performances and writing. A Conversation of Sparrows was in a book called In Other Words, short story. I'll talk about that later, and Games with the Water Horse, and The Day They Switched Off the Sun. So my talk is going to be in kind of two halves, one just talking about my kind of life, and then the next one I'm doing something different. So the second half is about the artwork I've made and explaining it, which I've not really done before, where I've relayed bits about my trauma. So next slide, please. So I said I'd be an artist age 6. In the second half, you'll find out why I never went to college, but there we go. But that was me. And you can't see it, but just above my head is a picture that a lady drew, a portrait of me and my sister. And she asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. And that's what I said. But there we go. So next slide, please. So I'm going to show you some bits of my drawing and book illustration first. Next slide, please. So this is one of the earliest pictures I have. I have one I did at school when I was about 14, but I lost a lot in a clear out. I drew from a very young age. I liked drawing. I liked translating the world around me in pictures. So this is a white shark. I like sharks. I was supposed to do a PhD in sharks, but I never did. But this is an airbrush picture I did probably when I was about 17, 18. And because of this picture, I went on to make some cutout sharks for the sea life centres in the 90s on hardboard and cut out. And yeah, they looked kind of real. And I used to get odd looks when I moved them from the studio home and to Portsmouth because it looked like you were carrying a shark. But there we go. Next slide, please. When I was a kid, I liked books that showed what the inside of things were. And I never thought that I would get a chance to do this myself, but in the late 80s, early 90s, because I didn't go on to do my academic career, I started working for my dad after I left university, who ran a printing company, and I worked from the bottom up. And that involved learning how to do the photography, how to do everything except printing, putting things together the lot. And I started doing drawings for him, and then for others. I got a job from Shell and things like this. And one year I did the RNLI poster and that sort of stuff. And then I sent off 200 letters to different book publishers and said, can I draw books for you? And one came back 2 years later and said, we've lost our artist. Can you draw this as a test? And it was a castle. When I did it, I got it. Yeah. And I started like a 10-year career with that publisher. And this was one of the first houses. And I want you to remember this, that it's a Tudor house, because I'll come on to this later. I actually found this a couple of months ago, actually, online too. And please forgive me for throwing water on the cat. Every picture I drew from then on, I had to do something funny in the picture. And in some of the pictures, they were so complicated, I had to sign something to say I didn't put anything rude in. Managed to smuggle a Dalek in one, but there we go. No one's ever found it. So next slide, please. So I kind of drew the things that I wanted to see when I was a kid, from things like Look and Learn and whatever. And so this is from a book called, he says, has it here? I'll show this later in the question, Zoom City, which was one of the last books I did. And I had to invent a whole city in my head and then draw it from different angles. And this was one that I really enjoyed because it was showing what was underground in a dig. So I used to like detail, but people say you must be very, very patient. And I'm not. I just like detail. So next slide, please. This was done a bit later. This was for a competition when I found out I was dyslexic. And it was a letter of the alphabet. And I thought, okay, I'll choose the letter A and I'll just draw a picture with loads of A's in it. And that's what this is. And I called on my experience of drawing archaeology stuff. I did books on Egypt and all sorts of things, and some of these cutaway book pages as well. So that I sent in. I have it still, and I won actually. And I got to meet famous author who's just died. But anyway, because he was one of the people giving the things away, and I bought my first computer with the money to start writing. So this was a dyslexia competition, in 2000. And yeah, I started writing. Always told at school, never write, John. But there we go. Next slide, please. I'm not brilliant at drawing people. I have to have something in front of me. I did a spell of drawing some pictures for Liberties. I love Art Nouveau style. And that's the only portrait I've drawn too. And it's not finished. It's finished as far as I'm concerned, because I drew the eyes and I thought I can't do any more. I can't make it any more than it is now. Some people have difficulty stopping. And that's probably the only picture that I did stop because I felt it was done. Next slide, please. I started doing some bit more rad stuff after about 2003-4, still involving my drawing skills, which are kind of translatable, and my geology skills too. And this was an exhibition in Taunton, which I put some pictures up on the wall. One of them was also just the word mother. And this is printed on vinyl, so I had to kind of draw it out, and then it's printed on vinyl that's only about 50 centimeters wide, so I had to fit all the bones in the smallest space as possible, cut them out, put them on the wall. Kind of like it. Next slide, please. I still draw now. This is based on a rook. It's not a rook because it has teeth. So that's my love of paleontology coming in. Prior to the asteroid hitting in 65 million years ago, a lot of birds had teeth. They didn't make it through the extinction. Only the birds with beaks that could pull the seeds out of the ground that had laid dormant for a while and things survived. But if you look outside and find a bird, you're just looking at a dinosaur, avian dinosaur. And I was fascinated by dinosaurs as a kid. Who wasn't? But in the 60s, it was even before they decided they were warm-blooded and had feathers. That all came as revelations through the early part of my life, fed my terminal curiosity as a child. I think a lot of autistic people are very terminally curious. Next slide, please. And this was for a trellis project that I did a couple of years ago during lockdown, where I was helping support some autistic people with some poetry for UCL. And I drew a series of pictures inspired. So I hadn't drawn for a while, and I did radical music and this and performance, and I thought, no, I'm going to be radical for this project and do some drawing. So I turned some of the conversations into drawn imagery, and these are the COVID corvids looking at a skull. Someone's showing it off, and it's a mammal skull. I've got bird skull, but this is the birds looking at mammal skulls. But there we go. Next slide, please. I still draw monsters. This is a digital one. I love drawing dinosaurs as a kid. Never really got much chance to do them in a book or anything, but yeah, this is just a digital drawing. I'm very interested in dragons and mythology and things like that. So next slide, please. So commissions and correlations. Next slide, please. This was a very early one. And I went into Pallant House a couple of times and I hid things. That covert artwork. I put some stones in one of the window sills in a little ring circle, and I took a book and I cut one corner away so when it rested on something, it looked like it was being pushed into whatever it was resting on, and I left one on the staircase, and they wanted to find out who it was, and they offered me a show in one of their rooms, and the room looked like a museum because it was all glass cabinets. And I said, well, okay, I'll do a geological interpretation of my lifetime. It actually led on to something bigger. And this is a page from Pallant House magazine. People complained because it said, well, why is there a geology book pages in this art magazine? And that's brilliant. Well done. So I made a stratigraphy out of my lifetime. And I'll come on to that in the second half for some of it. But that geological map is just a map of Chichester, but I've just retranslated it. Autistic people can be very good at repurposing things, changing things, altering things, making something from not nothing. I can't make something from nothing. I can't conjure something up. The blank page you had at school when you were told to write or draw something from your weekend was horrendous because there was too much to choose from. Next slide, please. And here's one of the images for a project it led on to, because someone saw that show in 2008 and it was called Goose on the Hill. And they said to me, would you like to do something to map the Cultural Olympiad in the Southeast for London 2012? And I thought, yeah, okay, as long as I can do it in geological metaphor. So that's what I did. I spent 2 million minutes of my life writing everything down, looked for correlations, and these are some of the diagrams that I made. This was actually where it says Dance with Ferns and Horsetails. It was one of the disability arts dance groups that I followed for the whole thing. Every single performance they did. I actually knew it off by heart for their final performance in London. One of the actors was sick, and I was asked if I would substitute because I'd seen them all. But then the show got cancelled at the last minute by someone else, so I never got my chance, but I did later. Next one, please. And this was the map I made. And I was really privileged because part way through I was awarded official Olympic branding by the IOC for my project, which a lot of companies paid a lot of money for. It was one of the Inspire Mark ones too, and that's a geological map I made. I printed 10 and I've still got 8. And Steve Silberman was one of the lucky 2. Bless him. Next slide, please. And just to add to that, one of my partners was actually the British Geological Survey. So everything was almost 100%, geological correct. Even though, and I had a show actually during the Paralympics where I zoned lots of fossils with hair grips, things I found at the at events, and that was shown in the geological BGS room at the Natural History Museum during the Olympics. So this was one of the most recent ones that I've done. I was commissioned to work with 3 disability groups in Surrey to make and help them inspire and make artwork for library service. I've always had a wonderful relationship with books, even being dyslexic. I love them. And for the Olympics, I actually cut some up and people put them on sticks and put them out, and people didn't like that, but some people did. So I took one of the books from the library and I created this long pull out from the book, and it said, read every minute of every day for the rest of your life, or something very similar. And the disability groups made artwork out of books too, and it was rather wonderful. And I think it's still on tour somewhere in Surrey Library Service. Next slide, please. And this actually was, I put in for a Art Plus award, which was an art in public competition run by Arts Council 2005 to 2007, I believe. And it was one of the first things I applied for, and I thought I'd like to be artist in resident on the trains and make maps of people's conversations, because that's really hard to do, because you sit next to someone on the train and talk to them, which is not the British thing to do, is it? So I put in for it, and I actually won one of the awards. And the application process was different. You just sat in front of someone for half an hour and you spoke what you'd like to do, which was better for me than trying to get it all on paper. Sometimes when I said about, talents and whatever, sometimes the opportunities you have are very sparse because the application process is very difficult, or the barriers are inside you. For me, RSD, I don't deserve anything, so I'll wait till someone asks me to do something. But this was one of the first things that caught people's attention, that I might be autistic. It's not the usual map I made on the train of someone's experience, where I overlaid a word of their experience on the station. It's a map of all the plastic bags in the trees between Ford, I believe, Station and South East Croydon. And I systemized them all as to what they were, the condition they were in, and the colour they were too. Very autistic. And it was the only map that the train company didn't like, and it was one of the ones that Arts Council loved. But there we go. Controversial. Next slide, please. And this was another something different I did in 2008. And it involves my synesthesia, because every time I've been in the turbine hall at Tate Modern, I hear seagulls. So when I was very privileged to be asked as part of a small team to experiment within the turbine hall, we could do anything we wanted to as long as it didn't damage, mark, or touch anything. And I thought, well, okay, I'm going to play the sound of seagulls for 10 minutes on the hour, every hour, as long as I'm there, which I did. But I also got some yellow tape, and my synesthesia doesn't like the color yellow. My synesthesia thinks yellow is horrendous. It's moldy, tastes of mold. I can taste color, which is why I'm not a very good painter. And I painted some yellow tape and I put it on the floor, and there's a crack there, the infamous crack. And what I had been doing was filling part of the crack in with Scrabble letters surreptitiously, because I just wanted words buried. And it had just been freshly filled in with concrete, and I used that as an offset. I put a yellow line down from this tape and played the sound of seagulls, and people would sit on it like on a beach, and people would come out and listen. And there were other people doing some really good stuff too. It wasn't just me. And at the end of the day, when I came to pull it up off the floor, it slightly cleaned it. So that it still remained a mark. It still remained a trace fossil there. And a couple of years later, when Tate did this booth where you could go in and confess things, I went in and confessed in the booth to leaving Scrabble letters in the crack and marking the floor. They since repolished it, so it's not there anymore, but you can see it quite plainly. There's a famous artist who did a performance piece where they're marching up and down, and if you look carefully on the floor, you can see it. But there we go. Next slide, please. And then this was a commission I had from Parliament, actually by the same person who commissioned me for the Olympics project. And I was the lead digital artist for community engagement. And we had an app, and it worked on the names of streets. Who were the streets named after? And I wanted to find out streets that were named after someone that didn't do something brilliant. So people could do any sort of artwork around the name of their street and look into it, and also encourage them to look up their family history with the archives. And we had pictures lent to us for the app from the portrait gallery and things like that. And at the end of it, I made a load of posters out of streets that people had sent in and the reason why they had sent it in. And it was about, every vote counts, encouraging people that, they can make a difference. And I wanted to know about people who had made a difference that people weren't shouting about. So this actually is Lochnagar Street. It's not my favourite. My favourite is something else. But it was sent in by someone, and it's the only one in the country. My favourite is Wilfred Owen Drive, but then that's World War One poetry. But anyway, next slide, please. Oh, the last thing actually about that last one was I was very lucky to have uh, an exhibition in the House of Parliament in the Great Hall, um, the big Tudor hall. It was kind of cold because it was in winter, but all the MPs and people visiting could walk through the series of posters, and I met a few, disliked a few, but there we go. Next slide, please. Patterns and performances. So as an autistic person, I like patterns. I see patterns everywhere. As a young child, my mum used to have to come in and chase the tigers that I used to see in the ceiling, Artex, etc., etc. But pattern finding can be both positive and negative. And it certainly helped me as a geologist. And performances, yeah, that was quite a late addition, but next slide, we'll talk about that. So I like repeating patterns. And again, this picture kind of convinced someone that I might be autistic too. It was a little bit of evidence. There are lots of like sunsets on beaches and things, just drawn very simply. But I like rhythms. I like music that changes. I like listening to music that other people think is the same, like Steve Reich, but actually changes and morphs all the way through. Because part of my synesthesia is that I touch sound, I touch music, I can feel it. So it has a shape and it goes through you. Next slide, please. Again, synesthesia is a double-edged sword too. So these are digital drawings of stones, and they're based on real stones. So this is my first attempt at doing a digital drawing rather than using a pencil, or my favorite thing is a biro. If you've never drawn with a biro, just get a piece of paper and a biro and draw. So again, they're just different studies, and later I can show you some of the stones that they were actually based on. Next slide, please. Again, exactly the same patterns, pictures, colors. I'm not brilliant at color unless it's digital, because like I said before, I taste color, so I find it very hard to mix color on a palette or a plate. And all my book illustration was done with pure colors, so I'd do a wash of vermilion and then a bit of blue in different places, etc., and build it up as a picture. Kind of laborious, but digital makes it a lot easier. Next slide, please. Same with this. This is a recent digital drawing. I tend to take photographs and transform them into things. Again, it's that don't give me a blank sheet of paper because I'll be overwhelmed. But I like chaos. I like putting something in and then getting a strange response from some of the software I use. And then I'll run with it when I see that I like. This was kind of one that I liked. Next slide, please. And then performances. So I had a residency at the Autism Research Centre. I've done about 5 residencies. So there was a one on the train. There was one at the University of Portsmouth in the Institute for Cosmology and Gravitation, where I made music from supernova recordings, pictures. I spent a lot of time with a supernova researcher and asked them what their favorite ones were, and then used them to make both music and imagery. And then I had a residency on the trains with a train company. And then the next one was at the Autism Research Centre in Cambridge, which actually was called confirmation. I didn't know that I was autistic. I had suspicions, and I was invited after doing a talk at Cheltenham Science Festival 2011. A lady saw my talk on the geology project and said, "Would you do a talk for us?" And I said, "Yes." didn't know what it was. They said later, okay, you'll be at Cheltenham Science Festival and you'll be on stage talking about, creativity, etc., with an artist called Ben Connors, who I actually was with today, and Gabriel, and also Simon Baron Cohen. I thought, oh, interesting. And the talk went down well. Lots of questions afterwards, and you can ask what you like of me. And one of the people came up to me afterwards and said, from Welcome, and said, you should do a residency, you two should work together. So that's what I did. A couple of years later, 2012, 2013, I had a short residency at the Autism Research Centre in Cambridge. And 2 days after it finished, I had a phone call saying, would I meet someone in London? They're a play producer and they'd really like to meet someone who's synesthetic. And I said, yes. So 2 days later, I was up at the Young Vic. The person and their assistant walk in. We go over the road to the small restaurant. 3 people at a 4-seat table is not congruous, is it? So I looked at this chair and I said out loud, because I didn't know what else to say, a chair is more alive often than the person who sits in it. And next thing I know, I'm helping Sir Peter Brook with a play about synesthesia called Vanity of Astonishment. And some of the stuff that I spent time with 2 of the actors in and went to Paris for some of the rehearsals and things. And we did a on stage talk at the Young Vic afterwards. I was told for the second time in my life by someone that I needed to do something, and Peter told me to write and perform my own work. So the next thing I did was that, but that was kind of like out the blue. Next slide, please. Astonishment is probably the right word. So if you want to see work that's different, commission people who view the world differently, but then you have to think differently about how you work with them. Something very akin to what Steve Silberman said, actually. Funny enough, often or not, people want me because I think differently, but can you just leave that autism bit at the door, please? No. Next slide, please. So when accepted and enabled, autistic neurodivergent people are able not only to play an equal role in society, but often an extraordinary and necessary one. Next slide, please. So, part 2. Early trauma. What did I make influenced by school trauma? I want you to think back to that Tudor house. Okay, next slide, please. This is one of the first things that I did that reflected the trauma I felt without even knowing that it was trauma that I was feeling. I had a rough time at school, being dyslexic, autistic, ADHD, in the mid to late 60s and 70s. You can imagine, well, you probably can't, but yeah. And this was my story. It was actually the year before the one I showed you about a letter of the alphabet. I had just discovered I was dyslexic, over 40. I thought I was terminally stupid because that's all I was told at school. So this is what I drew. I actually won that competition too, funny enough. And it was about the time that I was just doing it's full of Victorian allegories, etc. I didn't know I'd been traumatized. I just thought I'd had a rough time at school. And that's often the truth, that some people go through life not knowing they have trauma, and you can do something about it. So yeah, that's sad. Next slide, please. And after that, I started making stuff to express how I felt. Sort of that was 1999, 2000, that picture. And this was about 2005. And it's a pen. It's actually my school pen, my original school pen. And I stuck pins in it. Not because I don't like writing, but that's how difficult it was for me at school to write. And also the response from teachers. I was told never to write, John. You'll never be able to do it. You can't do it. And my first response when I knew I was dyslexic was to start writing poetry. But that's how it felt. It wasn't an anti-writing thing. It was just pick it up, try writing with it, because you have to be careful with your words. Next slide, please. Again, I didn't know I'd been traumatized. Maths. I hated it at school. I could do some of it, couldn't do other bits. I failed my O-level. I was in a class of 3 because I couldn't remember formula and other stuff. Couldn't do it. Just couldn't do it. Some of it, yeah, some of it couldn't. I love number, funny enough. And I retook my art O-level, it was blamed on me taking my art O-level a year early because I missed the double maths session. So I got it in the year from my maths teacher. So I was already on a losing wicket. I took it in the autumn again and found myself in a class of 1 because I failed it again. In the time it took me before the summer, when I had to retake, they changed the syllabus and they gave you all the formula, and it was 2 exams, not 3, and you didn't have to pass all 3, etc. And I got an A because I was facilitated right. And I thought they're going to be really pleased at school I got an A. And now when I went back, they just shouted at me because I must have been mucking around, because nobody goes from a D to an A. So I even got into trouble for doing the right thing. And a lot of us AUDHD people get that. And again, piled a little bit of accumulative trauma on me. Weapons of maths instruction. So there we go. Next slide, please. My art teacher, I remember standing at one of the parents' evenings, and the art teacher looked at my mum and dad and said, he's got more talent in his little finger than I have, but he won't apply it. He's lazy. No, it was ADHD. You could tell all the way back to when I was 15, 16. So 2008, I produced an artwork for the show at Pallant House. I redacted all the good bits out of my school reports, which I still had. It was at the same time the MPs were doing that with their expenses. So I thought it was a bit pertinent. Next slide, please. The moment that my teacher, when I was at junior school, did something was a moment you can't go back on. And this is the reason I never went to art college, because in my 4th year at junior school, I was really feeling it because I couldn't cover up being dyslexic. They didn't know it was dyslexia. They just called me stupid. And this teacher was a bully. So I drew a picture. I drew a picture of a Tudor house. And the head came behind his back and saw it and said, I want that on the wall. And I thought, blimey, I've done something worthwhile for once. Teacher said, write your name and the subject on it. I didn't know how to spell my name or the subject. So I had a choice. Do I ask for help? Know what he'll say. Stupid boy, can't even spell his own name. Never be anything. So I did my best. I guessed. He held it up in front of the class, tore it up, put it in the bin and said, stupid boy, can't even spell his own name. Never be anything. At that moment, I did not want to go to art college. And that's why I went and did geology, which was my second love. And it's one of those moments where your life changes forever and you can't go back. So in that photo, I was happy because that happened beforehand. And 2 little boys, moments that change life forever. And the reason it was called In the Arms of My Loving Father was because my dad told me a story about how he heard about the dropping of the atomic bomb and he realized nothing would ever be the same again. Next slide, please. And sometimes that's a recent drawing. Sometimes that's just how you feel. Out on a limb, feeding the birds at the end, way above everything. And it's a companion piece to one I'll show you at the end, actually. Next slide, please. This is called the imposter syndrome for obvious reasons, and came out of the trellis project again. Imposter syndrome, yeah, hard to. The one good thing about this picture is that it was seen, and it's in the International Archive of Pandemic Art at Berkeley, California, with a little explanation of why I drew it. But there we go. Try to fit in, but you can't, because you're always the imposter. And that has a lot to do with your well-being. All of these things accumulate and build and affect your well-being. Next slide, please. This actually was the positive thing that came out of that residency with the rail company. You must not put things in the timetable, John. So I did, with the help of someone who was leaving. And I wanted, what do you want in there, John? And I said, I want the word dream, because I've always dreamt of being an artist. I mean, this was years later after school. And I've always been marginalised, so put my dreams in the margin. 106,000, I believe, were printed. People complained. Spelling mistake. Love it. Brilliant. I achieved what I needed to do. Next slide, please. And again, this is that geological thing. And one of the things I used was that marker of being abused at school at the age of 10, 11. And that's what this diagram is about. So as a geologist, I love bone beds because they mark a place of catastrophe. And that for me was a catastrophe. So I retranslated it into geological metaphor. Next slide, please. I said I would talk about some of those things I wrote at the very beginning briefly, and I'm probably going to talk for about another 8 or 10 minutes. So this is Games with the Water Horse. It was actually a commission, and I wanted to put it in the commissions, but it talks about trauma, and this is probably one of the first things I ever wrote specifically about trauma. I had my first bout of trauma in 2011-12. Noticeable trauma, that is. I've lived most of my life with it. And this was inspired, this is where Peter inspired me to write and produce my own work. And I used that metaphor of a chair being empty and more alive than the person who sits in it. One of those pictures is at Margate, where I performed it. And I wrote 60 poems about 5 or 6 different themes to do with trauma in my life, stories. It was based around some Chinese mythology about dragons, about my uncle being sunk by the Japanese from the Japanese point of view, my mum passing away, things like that. And it was done on the hour. So the first poem was something that happened on the hour, then 1 minute past, 2 minute past, etc. So it was all jumbled up, and you say it and perform it. Can I have the next slide, please? Actually, yeah, you perform it in a circle, and what's the hardest thing for an autistic person to do? Look someone in the eye. Okay, I'm going to sit and I'm going to read a poem looking in someone's eye. So that's what I did, and I've performed it quite a few times until 2019 was the last, I believe. But the person who commissioned it just said, love it, and then said, your first performance is Venice in the Biennale. And I'm thinking, oh God, okay. So I had PTSD at the time. So someone with PTSD performing something, yeah. So next slide, please. I did some stuff at the Royal Academy, and again, it's the chair as a motif, because my synesthesia is object personification too. So the chair has a life. So I used it to interpret some of the building, and I was asked to do some live work there. And I just felt very sad for the chair being on its own in this picture, and I have used it for other things. No more empty chairs. Autistic people tend to leave early We don't want more neurodiversity loss. Things have to change. So that's and in the small picture, it's one of my monoliths. I did a whole series of monoliths, monuments for the autistic people who have left. Next slide, please. So Conversation of Sparrows is not a conversation with sparrows. So it was a short story I wrote that was published, in other words, and it tells this interwoven story of three people: a boy, a soldier who's not named, neither is the boy, and the gardener, who actually is me. And it's how I coped and dealt with making the garden tidy and attracting the birds, which to me went part way to ameliorate what was going on. So it was Conversation of Sparrows, and I won't give too much away, but the soldier is not what you expect. Actually a Second World War soldier, and you tend to feel for them with PTSD at the part way through. But the reason he got it, you'll hate him for, and it's like a twist at the end. And the boy, yeah, the boy was someone that we knew who went to Syria. But there we go. So yeah, some twists and turns, but it's in a book published called In Other Words, and I'm in the process of making it into an animation stroke film, hopefully. And the next slide, please. So this is my granddad. The first picture is 1917 when he joined up. The section picture is 1919, and on his arm he has a long service stripe, which was a year and a bit, and a wound stripe too, because he was wounded, and his badge of what he did. He went through a really incredible experience, actually. On his birthday, lunchtime, he found himself under his regiment was under mass attack, found themselves behind the lines, had to fight their way out for 10 days over an area. And when as a kid, I used to sit and spend a lot of time with my grandparents, and I used to sit at the table with toy soldiers, and he used to sit there looking with this distant look in his eye, and never understood it. He died before I did, unfortunately. I've recently done a thing for an art project in Portsmouth where you can ring anybody up, and that's the person I rang up. But yeah, he was kind of pivotal for the fight, but it left him with PTSD. Next slide, please. So what just to summary really quickly, what do I feel is wrong with the current system, and how does it fail autistic neurodivergent people? Next slide. I believe it's a combination of two rigid criteria: no specific or consistent autistic trauma definition, diagnostic procedures, lack of training, BPD, EUPD narratives, funding, lack of expertise, washing, traditionalism, misunderstanding autistic people's trauma responses, stigma, myths, stereotypes, power imbalances, and tell me anything in the questions. Ask me anything. We can talk about this. Next slide, please. Events that did not traumatize me: finding a neighbor passed away 2 minutes after I said hi, being in a near-miss aviation incident. Yeah. Being caught in the open in a gustnado. They're kind of mini tornadoes. And the stars are, I thought I'd had it and accepted it. And things do slow down and it's kind of peaceful. Accidentally witnessing a completed suicide. Events that did traumatize me: daily verbal abuse at school as a 9-year-old and subsequent bullying for being different. An incident of allergy anaphylaxis. That one, I fulfilled the criteria. So it was a piece of cake, and it was before my autism diagnosis. Academia. after my autism diagnosis and I didn't fulfill the criteria, and being betrayed by mental health services, I feel just added more. And that's one of the biggest problems and why I do trauma research. Next slide, please. Therapy that did not support me. CBT. And now this will be different for everybody. This is did not support me. CBT, sertraline, turned me weird after 3 days. DBT, anxiety groups, secondary mental health services enforced mindfulness, autism blaming, gaslighting, stereotyping, misunderstanding, and broken services. Because they do it in the name of doing you good. Therapy that did support me, EMDR, wonderful. Added into internal family systems therapy, autism and trauma understanding, peer support, vital, body doubling time, kindness, and creativity. That's what does you good. Doesn't cure often all the way, but creativity does you good. It helps well-being. There's chemical stuff in the head that happens. Next slide, please. And what got me through at school? Next slide, please. Last couple. Stars, astronomy, curious, laying out in the garden at the age of 10, looking at the stars. Dad bought me a telescope, wondering what the hell was up there and what was going on. Wonderful. This is actually one of my pieces of artwork from my residency with the train company. Pattern finding, Brighton station floor, patterns of chewing gum. No, John, you can't photograph them, but I did. And made up strange new constellations. So I turned that into something positive. And the next slide, please. Yeah, this kept me going when I was a kid. I had a box of possibility. And recently I did some training for Lego, and they sent me a Tudor house. Bless them. But that started everything off. And now I make things like these out of my head instead of drawing them. But it's traumatic at the moment, but these keep you going. Next slide, please. So, and I promised you another picture, the same as that out on a limb one. This was done for commission. It was building my belonging, Lego inspired. Someone actually said, well, it could be someone taking it apart too, but longing for belonging, basically. Next slide, please. And so, engendering belonging is key. I won't read it out, but if you feel you belong, that's half the battle. But trauma often makes you not feel you belong. Next slide, please. And I'll leave you this short poem. I'm not the word or the letters or the spaces in between or the person in your imagination you think I should have been. Often people just see us as deficits, and I'm one of the biggest anti-autism is a superpower thing you can imagine, but it does bring both good and bad. But then that's neurodiversity, isn't it? I can do things that others can't, and others can do things that I can't. That's not a superpower. But anyway, it's just being an evolutionary survival mechanism that helps things survive. The last slide, please. I have to show some logos of people who have funded some of the stuff I do, and I'm proud of it. So thank you.
Thank you, John. That was amazing. Seeing your work and hearing more about your experiences and the way they interweave into your work is really extraordinary. Thank you so much for sharing that.
I promised a cat too, so
You did, and who's this? Who are we looking at here?
this is Mr. Weasels. He's one of a pair of PTSD cats that I had.
Fantastic. I have to say, unfortunately, we discovered about 20 to 8 that we have had some technical difficulties tonight, and lots and lots of people who registered didn't get access to couldn't get in. And Fiona has been working to in the background to try and fix that problem, but unsuccessfully. So we only have, I think, only a few people have managed to get in. So I think what we might need to do, John, is invite you back for the Q&A. Maybe we could show a recording of your talk and then have you come for a live Q&A. I think that because I just know that we had so many people signed up tonight, and I know they would have so many questions for you. So if you would be open to that, we would love to invite you back so that we can do that. And we wouldn't ask you to deliver the talk again. We would play the recording of the talk, but perhaps you would then be able to come and do a live Q&A. But I wondered, because we know that lots and lots of people watch the recording of the webinar, I wondered if maybe I could ask you some questions about
Certainly.
things that. Thank you. I mean, one thing you mentioned right at the beginning of your talk was that you had this terminal curiosity, and I love that phrase. And I'm just wondering, like, how do we foster that curiosity rather than extinguish it, particularly in childhood?
Mum and Dad had a friend staying, and that friend decided to help with some tidying up, and I had a very first fossil collection that I had, and I couldn't find it, and it had been put in the bin. That did a lot of damage to me, just that one little thing. It wasn't done maliciously, it was just done. So a lot of the things that put kids off is that, oh yes, sort of stuff. I mean, I was a Cub Scout. I collected rocks. I passed on a collecting badge because of it. I was kind of encouraged. And a lot of, some of the thinking around things like ABA, etc. And, if you've got an interest, don't encourage it. Tosh. My interest as a kid became my career. And, I've read in books that, that mustn't happen. And I'm thinking, well, why? So any encouragement that you can give to a child if they express an interest in something, it may not last. It may not last. Some do. Some interests only last, this is the beauty of autism crossed with ADHD, isn't it? I must have all of that. I must have bubblegum card. Oh, look, there's 4 in here. I've got numbers, whatever. It's out of 60. I must collect the whole set. Sometimes it can get a bit over the top, but as much encouragement as you can give. I wanted to know at the age of 6 what was below my feet, what was around me, and what was in the sky above. I wanted to know how it worked. And Mum and Dad got me a subscription to Look and Learn instead of the Buster or Beano or whatever. And yeah, that was an encouragement, just a little step. And those little steps, little things matter. Little things matter, both positive and negative, because with trauma, these things that people do to you, accumulate. And, the kindness accumulates too.
Thank you. I'm thinking about the relationship between curiosity and what autistic people have been telling us for years, but obviously what autistic people have known for years, but research is just catching up to, is this relationship between interests and passions and hobbies
Mm.
and thriving and flourishing. I wondered if maybe you could talk to us a bit about, the importance of that relationship for you, the relationship between the things you really care about and your well-being.
I'll use the Lego for an example. When I was a kid, I had this box of possibility. I could make whatever I wanted. That was, I had some sort of semblance of control over something, whereas at school I didn't. So that kind of gave me joy. Walking across a beach and finding a fossil, first person to touch it for 50 million years or whatever, gave me a buzz, gave me a joy. I know now it was a lot to do with dopamine hits in my head. And a lot of us autistic people are ADHD as well. Um, but they don't take away the negative stuff, as it were, but that act of finding something, of dopamine hits, and even just coloring. People put coloring down, but it's so flipping brilliant because it takes you out of yourself and you get into a flow, and it releases hormones in your head, and it does you good. Creativity, why do you think in oppressive societies they want to ban creativity? Because they want to keep you down. And often artists are very subversive and we think very differently. And just doing those things, when I was at my worst, and sometimes even just sorting Lego into their different types really helped, as well as building something. If I couldn't cope with building anything, just that very act of being occupied doing something. um, Never as an ADHD person do you sit down with nothing to do. um, but it just, anything you can do, but creativity especially, to bolster your well-being, has to be worth doing something, whether that's making model cars, painting cats, gardening. All these things are creative. They all help your well-being. And sometimes, yes, you do get so depressed you can't even start anything. But again, that's when I was sorting Lego, or I was sorting anything, systemizing something, sorting it into categories, something just to get that my head going. So I didn't have to think about stuff that was going on. I could fill it with
Mm.
something else, distract. Um, so, but there, there can be, sometimes we have the tendency to go over the top. Um, Me as a sort of 14-year-old on my bike going down the beach in the dark with a torch looking for fossils, because that's when low tide was, much to the worry of my parents. But then again, oh, John, you're obsessed with it. But then when you're 25 and you're sat in a museum counting fossils, you're an expert.
Mm.
Where does it change? Obsession is probably the wrong word. Passionate. I want to do it properly. Doing it properly involves being, that. But yeah, distraction fulfills, a need in your head, in your body. Has to be worth doing.
I think that's an interesting point, isn't it? That line that separates, um, a kind of unhealthy obsession, as it might be perceived from the
Yeah.
outside, to somebody being an absolute expert. I'm really fascinated by that, and I wonder about, particularly in childhood, there's this idea that, if a child is perseverating, so I'm using kind of, very I'm purposefully choosing pathologizing language here, so if they want to play Lego, or if they want to do some of that systemizing, it's kind of, if it's too much, then it's something the child should be discouraged from. They need more variety. They need to, what are your thoughts on that?
Um, it's funny, isn't it? This goes back to a question that I've always asked, actually. My child sits in his room all day, plays Lego, plays computer games. How can I get him out to socialize? And I say, well, don't, because you're taking them out of their environment and what they're enjoying, what they're keeping going. And at some point, they'll let you in on their world. You know, it's, I think, if telling someone that they're doing it too much can be quite harmful, because it you're not able to rationally think, oh, yes, I'm doing it too much. Oh, no, this person wants to stop everything. And that can really hurt. Obviously, things have changed since I was a kid. We have the internet, we have games, we have computers. It's changed quite drastically what you can, if you're staying up for 12 hours just playing computer games overnight, obviously, that has a detrimental effect on you. And this is why I don't play computer games, because that's what I would do, and I did start doing. And some interests can be quite strange, let's say. Um, And with the internet, that makes it very easy to satisfy that need. Um, but to stop everything, would take everything away until you look someone in the eye, I think is incredibly harmful,
Mm.
and trauma inducing, and papers have shown that doing that sort of thing actually does make autistic kids into autistic adults with PTSD.
Yeah.
Um, and we do kind of almost get sensible when we're older, although there is still that need to have one of everything or two of everything, which, yeah, is sometimes not great.
That's a really interesting idea because as you know, my research area is with autistic children, asking them
Mm,
about their everyday school experiences. And when I talk to older children and young adults about their school life, something they often will reflect on is how life gets easier as they get older, in the sense that they know themselves better. And some of the challenges that they had when they were younger, they have built strategies to be
yeah,
able to overcome those challenges. I'm just wondering, is that a trajectory that kind of continues through life? Do you see yourself as being, kind of more settled as you've got older, or more trying to find the right word for it. I can't find the right word, but I'm just interested in that idea that you brought up about how you change as you get older.
I think, you know, getting older gives you the opportunity to satisfy more of those things you couldn't do as a child, like go places to find fossils or afford to make things and things like that. Um, I'm not sure it does get easier to know yourself. I'm not sure it does get easier because a lot of autistic ADHD people are bathed in trauma. And the older you are, the more chance there is to experience it. Because, in the workplace, um, in kind of everyday life, my theme, one of the themes I'm looking at for my trauma research is how betrayal affects people. I
Mm.
think, a model of autism trauma based on betrayal is probably more accurate than PTSD or PTSD, definitely.
Mm.
Um, a lot of autistic people I speak to have, been betrayed personally, systemically, institutionally, societally, and add in a bit of intergenerational trauma, like, my experience with my granddad, and the misunderstanding of society. And I think as an adult, you can see more of that. As a child, you just accept. At school, I was, oh, you're told off today. Yeah, well, your teacher knows best because they're an adult. And you don't really get affected. It doesn't really affect you as a betrayal, does it? Because you don't understand that.
Mm.
So I think, yeah, positively, yeah, you do grow up. You are able to do stuff. But then when your chosen career is blocked from you by people getting in the way, and the barriers that put in front of you, and as an artist, I'm compelled to make, it's not a career choice as such. Why, when I said as age 6, oh, I want to be an artist, didn't know about it, that's just what I felt inside. So when barriers come in the way that stop you, it's not like, oh, well, okay, it's like, oh no, what's going on? And if you grow up at school, you have RSD because you're ADHD, and you're like me a bit, that which is why I do this, because I don't want young kids to grow up like me, because you know I'm 40. um I don't ask people to work. I find that very difficult. I can't ask for help. I can't ask for work. I don't want people to grow up like that. And one talk I did in a school, I used to do a lot of talks in school. A young girl came up to me and said, "I've never met an adult dyslexic. I didn't know they existed." And I'm thinking, what is the school telling them?
Mm.
You know, and they need preparing for the outside, because the outside's rough. Even experiences at university, I was undiagnosed, everything. So I just thought I was weird, and so did other people. But my experience could have been a lot better. You see, trauma isn't only about the things that happen to you, it's about the things that don't, because of that trauma. So by the time I got to university and I said I had never done my PhD, well, there's a person who stepped in the way and said they weren't going to be my supervisor because I was after their job. Two biggest sins you can commit against an autistic person is misunderstand their motives, which is horrendous because it attacks our core being, and do something at the last minute that betrays us. And I never did my I can't even talk it. PhD. I had the opportunity to go abroad and do it, but ADHD and those experiences made my life small, and I couldn't do it. And my parents wanted me to get a PhD and wanted me a doctor of something. They didn't care what. And I probably had the capability of doing it, but I didn't do it. Something I regret. Um, but the way we translate the world around us can be very different. Luckily, sometimes it does you good, stands in your stead. And, if you don't know much about the world and you're a bit naive and you give a very honest answer, example, getting into university, and I'll be very quick over this. Went for my interview, waited outside, looked at the fossils in the cabinet. I knew who was interviewing me, very famous geologist I'd met actually before. Um, Recently on the TV, eminent, let's say. "Come in," he shouted. I went in, take a chair. The chair was covered in books. I had to move them. Couldn't see him because there were books in the way. He parted them. He said, "Take a chair," which I always find hysterical because I never can. And I sat down. He moved these books and he looked at me and he looked at my application, handwritten application then, and he said, "You're from Portsmouth?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Okay, how deep is the Solent?" And I said, "Well, it depends where you measure it." And he said, "You're in." That was my interview for university. He said,
Amazing.
I don't care what A-level results you get, we want you." And sometimes being that naive, saying the first thing that comes into your head can both take you further forward and hold you back.
Mm.
But like I said, trauma isn't only the things that happen to you, they're the things that don't happen because of it. Something I think is actually more important, because you can deal
So,
with the thing that happened to you with the EMDR or other things, but you can't ever go back and do the things that you never did. That's a grieving process, almost a bereavement.
that's a really powerful thing to contemplate, isn't it? It's not something that I'd ever thought of before.
People, when you say, "Oh, I've had PTSD," the first thing they say to you is, "Oh, where did you serve?" People don't understand that trauma can affect every inch of your life, and to have something really seriously traumatic can be the most light of things to other people. And along with being misunderstood as an autistic person, being understood your trauma is quite trauma inducing, let's say. And when we looked at the top 10 things about suicidal ideation in autistic people, being believed was one of them. If you're not believed that you have trauma because you don't fit the criteria, or the person sitting in front of you doesn't think it's bad enough and doesn't believe you, this is what's wrong. a lot of autistic people cannot get the support they need because that model of trauma isn't there and it's misunderstood. And for kids at school now suffering trauma, mental health issues, the help isn't there. That really concerns me. Like I said, I don't want kids to grow up like me, which is why I try and do things like this.
And we're really grateful for you sharing your wisdom with us tonight, John. I always close our webinars with the same question to our speakers, and that is, of all of the things you've shared with us tonight, all the wisdom that you shared, if we were to go away with just one key message, what would that be?
If someone feels they've been betrayed and traumatized, believe them. But I'll also leave you with a positive note, actually. So that classroom where the teacher had a go at me, quite a long time later, I went and did one of my book talks as a book illustrator, actually in that school. And the library was the room where things happened to me, and it had my books, a couple of my books on the shelves. And so the words uttered in that room, that you'll never be anything, kind of echoed into the dark, into the distance. But there's one more added bit, because 2012, as part of the Olympics in our area, they built a boat. And they built a boat and covered the hull with pieces of wood that had memories for people. I gave a paintbrush, which I've been doing some stuff with, but I also gave a couple of pieces of beechwood, and I have a piece here of the same beechwood. And so that's now in the hull of this boat. The beechwood came from the bookshelves that were in that library, that were in that classroom in the 60s, where those things happened to me. So that is now goes round, that piece of wood goes round the world, and I can hold it. And those memories have been treated with the EMDR. But yeah, being believed is probably the most important thing. If you feel something and it's affecting you, then people need to take notice.
Thank you, John. Thank you. And again, for those of you who are watching the recording of this at some point in the future who tried to get in tonight and our technical gremlins denied you entry, I am so, so sorry. And we will be inviting John back where we can play the recording of his talk and then you can put your questions to him directly. But in the meantime, John, just a huge heartfelt thanks for sharing your creativity and your wisdom and your, all the richness of your lived experience. Thank you so much.
Thank you.